Good morning and welcome to University of Toronto International Summer Academy podcast series. My name is Jelena and I'm your host. This morning in the studio, I have students from Global Citizenship Program, and they are doing research on food insecurity, specifically in East Africa. But before we dive into their research, I would like to just go around the room and introduce ourselves.
Buongiorno, mi chiamo Matilde e vengo dall'Italia. Good morning everyone, I'm Matilde and I'm from Italy.
Bonjour, il mio nome è Jasper e vengo aus der Schweiz. Hi, my name is Jasper and I come from Switzerland.
Merhaba, benim adım Ayca. Türkiye'den geliyorum. Hello, my name is Ayca. I'm coming from Turkey.
Assalamu alaikum, اسمي Noha وأنا من المغرب. Hi, my name is Noha and I'm from Morocco.
Welcome. So part of your program is to do research on UN sustainable goals, and we're specifically looking at zero hunger, looking at food insecurity and sustainable agriculture. And your group is researching sustainable agriculture in East Africa. And what I would like to find out right now is what is the current situation in the region, and also why East Africa?
So, thank you for the question. Talking about the context, we all know sustainable agriculture is one of the most important and urgent issues affecting millions of people across the African continent, with a special focus, of course, on East Africa. So, why did we choose East Africa? Because this region is not only reaching agricultural potential, but it's also one of the most vulnerable to climate change, environmental degradation, and food insecurity. Countries like Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Rwanda depend heavily on farming, not just for food, but for jobs, income, and overall development. In fact, agriculture contributes between 24 and 44% of national GDPs in East Africa, and more than 80% of the population relies on it for their livelihoods. This isn't just an economic issue, it's a matter of survival. That's why today we'll explore the current challenges in the region and the growing need for sustainable farming. We'll look at what sustainable agriculture means, what is measured right now, and how it could shape the future of food production in Africa. The current challenges in the region and the growing need for sustainable farming are taking over, firstly, on the economy of these countries and the access for nutritious food, and secondly, on their independence and self-reliance. It matters now more than ever. Now, ask yourself, if so many people rely on agriculture to live, shouldn't we make sure it's done in a way that lasts? That's exactly why sustainable agriculture and food security are such critical issues in East Africa. With such a large portion of the population depending on the land for food and income, adopting sustainable practices it isn't just a nice idea, it's a necessity. But what does sustainable agriculture actually mean? In easy words, it's about meeting the needs of the present, feeding people and supporting livelihoods without compromising the ability of future generations to do the same. In East Africa, this approach is essential for ensuring food security, reducing poverty, and promoting economic development. And here's the exciting part. When farmers adopt sustainable methods, they can actually improve soil fertility, conserve water, and boost biodiversity. That leads to higher productivity and more resilience in the face of climate change. So, the question is, if sustainable agriculture helps to protect our environment, fight poverty, and feed our people, what are we waiting for?
That's a very good question. Thank you so much for giving us that really in-depth context and overview. And let's now zoom into the leading causes and expand on what you already shared.
Thank you for your question. I have a list here of causes of food insecurity in East Africa, and I'll go in order of significance, so I'll start with the most important. And unfortunately, that is climate change. East Africa is very vulnerable to climate change, and it brings extreme weather to the region, either in the form of droughts or floods, or even in strange rainfall patterns that are unpredictable by farmers, which greatly affects crop yields and livestock health. There have been back-to-back droughts in Africa, leading to failed crops and livestock deaths, and at this time, the droughts also affected over 20 million people negatively in the form of displacement, increased food insecurity, or poverty. Somalia and Kenya specifically have faced 5 consecutive failed rainy seasons in recent years, as reported by the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. The next most important cause, or most significant cause, is political instability. Armed conflicts disrupt farming and displace civilians, also destroying infrastructure or making it inaccessible to markets or roads to go anywhere. In Ethiopia's Tigray region, the conflict between the Tigray People's Liberation Front and the Ethiopian federal government led to famine-like conditions because of blocked food aid and ruined farmland in 2021, as stated by Human Rights Watch. South Sudan, unfortunately, since its creation in 2011, has had political instability with violence that makes it unsafe to farm or transport food around the country, according to the FAO. And this issue is a really big one in East Africa, and progress should be made towards achieving the 16th Sustainable Development Goal of peace, justice, and strong institutions. Another cause is bad agricultural practices. Lots of East Africa does subsistence farming, which is where people farm to feed themselves, not necessarily to sell their crops, and they have little education or training or use of technology or fertilizers. The agricultural productivity in sub-Saharan Africa in general is the lowest in the world, with around only 5% of arable or plantable land in Africa being irrigated or watered, which is incredibly low in comparison to Asia's 40%. This shows how important the UN Sustainable Development Goal of quality education is in this region. Both statistics were calculated by the World Bank. Additionally, 30 to 40% of food produced in sub-Saharan Africa is lost post-harvest because of a lack of proper storage and fast transportation. Another cause is global economic factors. East African countries import a lot of staple foods like rice and wheat, and this can make it easy to increase food insecurity because they're affected by external factors. For example, the Russian-Ukrainian war has caused a spike in global wheat prices because both of the countries are large exporters of it. And East African countries like Somalia import around 90% of their wheat from Ukraine, and they were very impacted by this, increasing food insecurity, unfortunately. And also, weak local currencies, high inflation, and high unemployment makes food more expensive for the people. And very quickly, another one is population growth, because East Africa's population is projected to double by 2050. So food demand will double, while food production or ability to import food likely won't change as drastically, which will worsen the problem of food insecurity if action is not taken to solve all of the previously mentioned causes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noha. And it sounds like all of these causes are interrelated and interlinked. And you did such a great job in giving us a very concise overview of all of them. Now, I'm curious, what are the effects of all these causes, and who is the most affected?
Yes, so thank you for this question. And now I'll tell you, let's take a look to how unsustainable farming in East Africa affects, first of all, the people, the climate, and the economy, and how all of this connects to the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, like zero hunger, climate action, good health, decent work, reduced inequalities, and much more. So first of all, the people. Over 70% of East Africans depend on agriculture to survive. But in places like Kenya, soil degradation is cutting crop yields by up to 30%. That means less food on table and a higher risk of hunger and malnutrition, which is directly related to zero hunger. As harvests shrink, so do incomes, especially for smallholder farmers. Whole rural communities are falling deeper into poverty, and social inequalities grow. There's also a health crisis. In areas with intensive farming, people are exposed to hazardous pesticides and heavy metals, which contaminate the soil and water, creating long-term health risks for those living nearby, which is connected directly to the good health and decent work SDG number 3 and 8. The second part is on the climate. Farming practices that clear forests or misuse land release massive amounts of carbon. This worsens climate change and weakens the land's ability to recover. Soil lose their structure, can't hold water, and become vulnerable to both droughts and floods, which are already becoming more common due to climate change. This creates a dangerous cycle. Degraded land fuels climate change, and climate change accelerates land degradation. When plant discovery disappears and soil loses fertility, entire ecosystem starts to collapse. And agriculture depends on these ecosystems to function in the first place. The last one is on the economy. The economy cost is massive. East Africa loses over 65 billion each year due to the land degradation. In Kenya, only 20% of cropland remains fully arable. Since agriculture contributes between 24 and 44% of national GDPs, which would mean between 1/4 and half of the country's income each year is only agriculture, these losses strike at the heart of the region's economy. When yields drop, countries are forced to import more food, which pushes prices up and puts extra pressure on government budgets. It also means job losses. Farming is the number one employer across Africa. When land becomes unproductive, people lose work, and many are forced to migrate to cities, adding stress to already fragile urban economies. And with weaker agricultural exports, countries lose critical revenue from crops like tea, coffee, fresh produce, which are often key to their global trade. Finally, this all increases social inequality. When harvests fail and food becomes scarce, it is the poorest who suffers first and the most. The gap between rich and poor widens, especially during climate shocks and food shortages. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jasper. Now that we have the current situation and the leading causes and the effect, part of your research and part of your project is to not only research the solutions and analyze them, but also recommend your own. And you're going to be doing that next week as part of your advocacy campaign presentation. What I'm curious right now is to find out in your research so far, what kind of solutions did you find out, both from the bottom up and top down? So looking at both, policies and also grassroots initiatives.
Thank you for the question. As the last speaker of this podcast, I want to talk about the three main countries I have researched: Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia. I realized that Somali government didn't even have a policy in the case of food insecurity because of their political instability. Before connecting Ethiopia to your question, I want to refer to Noha and point out that 91% of small-scale local farmers rely on rainwater for drinking and farming. COSA Ethiopia claims that the year 2019 was the driest year of Ethiopia. So the government took action, GTP, Growth and Transformation Plan, to develop economic stability and to decrease the percentage of food insecurity before the end of 2025. This is a top-down solution. I have also researched the bottom-up action in Kenya. There are community seed banks in Kitui and Makueni help farmers access drought-resistant seeds and boost resilience. Youth groups like Uteri and Bugoma Champions promote generative farming and use mobile tools for solid and weather updates. And in Nairobi's formal settlements, rooftop farms in Karaba help families grow their own food. Together, these state-led and community-led efforts complement each other to build a resilient and equitable food future. To sum up the podcast today, we pointed out the importance of facts about food insecurity, the causes of food insecurity in East Africa, how it affects many lives, and the actions that have been taken to decrease it. Just don't forget the food insecurity is real. If you don't take actions, everybody will be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you you so much. And thank you also for summarizing what you all shared. We are unfortunately out of time, but I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all once again for sharing your research so far. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day. Bye.